All right. Let's go ahead and do another one. Pop this up. Heads to AV29. AV30 goes through Samuel, 2 Samuel 3. So, 1 Samuel 26. Oh, shoot. 1 Samuel 26 to 31. All right. In time, the men of Ziph came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, "Is David not hiding on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jeshimon?" So Saul rose up and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to look for David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon by the road. David was then living in the wilderness, and he learnt that Saul had come into the wilderness after him. So David sent spies to verify that Saul had indeed come. David later went to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul and Abner, the son of Ner, the chief of his army, were lying asleep. Saul lay asleep in the camp enclosure with the troops camping all around him. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, "Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul?" Abishai replied, I guess I pronounced that wrong. I'm pronouncing them all wrong. Abishai replied, "I will go down with you." So David and Abishai made their way to the troops by night, and they found Saul lying asleep in the camp enclosure with his spear stuck in the ground next to his head. Abner and his troops were lying all around him. Abishai now said to David, "Today God has surrendered your enemy into your hands, and now please let me pin him into the ground with the spear just once, and I will not need to do it twice." However, David said to Abishai, "Do not harm him, for who can lift his hand against the anointed of Jehovah and remain innocent?" David continued, "As surely as Jehovah is living, Jehovah himself will strike him down, or his day will come, and he will die, and he will go down into battle and perish. It is unthinkable from Jehovah's standpoint for me to lift my hand against the anointed of Jehovah. So now take, please, the spear next to his head and the water jug, and let us be on our way." So David took the spear and the water jug from next to Saul's head, and they went away. No one saw or noticed them or woke up, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from Jehovah had fallen upon them. Then David crossed to the other side and stood on the top of the mountain, some distance away, with a considerable space between them. David called out to the troops and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, "Abner, will you not answer?" Abner answered, "Who are you who calls to the king?" David said to Abner, "Are you not a man, and who is like you in Israel? So why did you not keep watch over your lord the king? For one of the soldiers came in to do away with your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as Jehovah is living, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the anointed of Jehovah. Now look around. Where are the king's spear and the water jug that were next to his head?" Then Saul recognized the voice of David and said, "Is this your voice, my son David?" David replied, "It is my voice, my lord the king." He added, "Why is my lord chasing after his servant? For what have I done, and what am I guilty of? My lord the king, please listen to the words of his servant. If it is Jehovah who incited you against me, let him accept my grain offering. But if men have incited you, they are cursed before Jehovah, because they have driven me away today from being united with Jehovah's inheritance, saying, 'Go serve other gods.' And now do not let my blood fall to the ground away from the presence of Jehovah, for the king of Israel has gone out to look for a single flea, as if he were chasing a partridge on the mountains." In turn, Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, my son David, for I will do you no more harm. because you regarded my life as precious this day. Yes, I have acted foolishly and have made a terrible mistake. David answered, Here is the spear of the king. Let one let one of the young men come over and take it. It is Jehovah who will repay each one for his own righteousness and his own faithfulness. For today Jehovah gave you into my hand, but I was unwilling to lift my hand against the anointed of Jehovah. Look, just as your life was precious to me this day, so may my life be precious in the eyes of Jehovah, and may he rescue me out of all distress. Saul replied to David, May you be blessed, my son David. You will surely do great things, and you will surely prevail. Then David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. 1 Samuel 27. One sec. Okay. However, David said in his heart, One day I will perish by Saul's hand. The best thing for me is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up looking for me in all the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand. So David rose up with 600 men who were with him and went over to Achish, the son of Maoch, the king of Gath. David stayed with Achish in Gath, he and his men. Oh, sorry. So David rose up with the 600 men who were he and his men, each man with his household. With David were his two wives, Ahinoam and Jezreel, and Abigail, the Carmelite, Nabal's widow. When report was made to Saul that David had run away to Gath, he stopped searching for him. Then David said to Achish, If I have found favor in your eyes, let them give me a place in one of the cities of the countryside, so that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? So Achish gave him Ziklag on that day, and that is why Ziklag belongs to the kings of Judah down to this day. The length of time that David lived in the countryside of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. David would go up with his men to raid the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites, for they were inhabiting the land that extended from Talam as far as Shur and down to the land of Egypt. When David would attack the land, he preserved neither man nor woman alive, but he took the flocks, herds, donkeys, camels, and clothing, after which he would return to Achish. Then Achish would ask, Where did you make a raid today? David would reply, Against the south of Judah, or against the south of the Jerahmeelites, or against the south of the Kenites. David did not spare alive any man or woman to be brought to Gath, saying, They may not tell them about us and say, This is what David did. And that was his practice the whole time he lived in the countryside of the Philistines. So Achish believed David, saying to himself, He has certainly become a stench among his people, Israel, so he will always be my servant. 1 Samuel 28. In those days, the Philistines assembled their armies for war against Israel. So Achish said to David, You know, of course, that you and your men will go out into battle with me. At that, David said to Achish, You surely know that what your servant will do. Achish said to David, That is why I will appoint you as my permanent bodyguard. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed the spirit mediums and the fortune tellers from the land. The Philistines assembled and went and set up camp in Shunem. So Saul assembled all Israel, and they set up camp in Gilboa. When Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. Although Saul would inquire of Jehovah, Jehovah never answered him, either in dreams or by the Urim or through the prophets. Finally Saul said to his servants, Find me a woman who is a spirit medium, and I will go and consult her. His servants replied, Look, there is a woman who is a spirit medium in Endor. So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments and went to the woman by night with two of his men. He said, Use divination, please, by acting as a spirit medium, and bring up for me the one whom I designate to you. However, the woman said to him, "You must know what Saul did, how he removed the spirit mediums and the fortune tellers from the land. Why then are you trying to trap me to have me put to death?" Saul then swore to her by Jehovah, saying, "As surely as Jehovah is alive, you will not incur any guilt in this matter." At this, the woman said, "Whom should I bring up for you?" He replied, "Bring up Samuel for me." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out at the top of her voice and said to Saul, "Why did you trick me? You are Saul." The king said to her, "Do not be afraid, but what do you see?" The woman replied to Saul, "I see one like a god coming up out of the earth." At once he asked her, "What does he look like?" To which she said, "It is an old man coming up, and he is clothed in a sleeveless coat." At that Saul realized that it was Samuel, and he bowed low with his face to the ground and prostrated himself. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by having me brought up?" Saul replied, "I am in great trouble. The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me and no longer answers me, either through the prophets or in dreams. So that is why I am calling on you to let me know what I should do." And Samuel said, "Why do you inquire of me now that Jehovah has departed from you and has become your adversary? Jehovah will do for himself what he foretold through me. Jehovah will rip the kingdom out of your hands and give it to one of your fellow men, David. Because you did not obey the voice of Jehovah, and you did not execute his burning anger against the Amalekites, that is why Jehovah is doing this to you this day. Jehovah will also give both Israel and you into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Jehovah will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." At once Saul fell full length on the ground and became very much afraid because of Samuel's words. And there was no strength left in him, because he had not eaten food all day and all night. When the woman came to Saul and saw that he had been greatly disturbed, she said to him, "Here your servant has obeyed what you said, and I risked my life, and did what you told me to do. Now please listen to what your servant has to say. Let me set before you a piece of bread, then eat, so that you will have some strength to go on your way." But he refused and said, "I am not going to eat." However, his servants and also the woman kept urging him. Finally, he listened to them and got up from the ground and sat on the bed. The woman had a fattened calf in the house, so she quickly slaughtered it and took flour and kneaded dough and baked it into unleavened bread. She served them to Saul and his servants, and they ate. After that, they rose up and left during the night. 1 Samuel 29. The Philistines assembled all their armies at Aphek, while the Israelites were camping by the spring in Jezreel. And the lords of the Philistines were passing by in their hundreds and with their hundreds and their thousands, and David and his men were marching at the rear with Achish. But the princes of the Philistines said, "Why are these Hebrews here?" Achish replied to the princes of the Philistines, "This is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel, who has been with me for a year or more. I have not found any fault in him from the day he deserted to me until today." But the princes of the Philistines became indignant at him, and they said to him, "Make the man go back. Let him return to the place where you assigned him. Do not let him go down with us into the battle, so that he will not turn against us during the battle. For what better way to put himself in favor with his Lord than with the heads of our men? Is this not the David about whom they sang when they danced, saying, 'Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands'?" So Achish summoned David and said to him, "As surely as Jehovah is living, you are upright, and I am pleased to have you on the campaign with my army. For I have not found any fault with you from the day you came to me until today. But the lords do not trust you. So return in peace, and do not do anything to displease the lords of the Philistines." However, David said to Achish, "Why, what have I done? What fault have you found in your servant from the day that I come to you until today? Why should I not come with you and fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered David, "From my standpoint, you have been good as an angel of God. But the princes of the Philistines have said, 'Do not let him go with us into the battle.' Now get up early in the morning with the servants of your lord who came with you. Rise up and leave early in the morning as soon as it is light." So David and his men rose up early in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel. 1 Samuel 30. When David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, the Amalekites had made a raid on the south and on Ziklag, and they attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. They had taken captive the women and all who were in it, from the smallest to the greatest. They had not killed anyone, but they had carried them off and gone on their way. When David and his men came to the city, they found it burnt down, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been carried off captive. So David and the men with him began weeping loudly until they had no strength left to weep. David's two wives had also been carried off captive, Ahinoam and Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. David was very distressed because the men were talking of stoning him, for all the men had become very bitter over the loss of their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself by Jehovah his God. David then said to Abiathar the priest, the son of Ahimelech, "Please bring the ephod here." So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. David inquired of Jehovah, "Should I chase after the marauder band? Will I overtake them?" And he said to him, "Go in pursuit, for you will certainly overtake them, and you will make the rescue." What's up? Yeah. All right. David immediately set out with the 600 men who were with him, and they went on as far as Besor, the Wadi Besor, where some of the men stayed behind. David kept up the chase of 400 men, but the 200 men who were too tired to cross the Wadi Besor stayed behind. They found an Egyptian man in the field and took him to David. They gave him food to eat and water to drink, as well as a slice of cake of pressed figs and 2 cakes of raisins. After he ate, he regained his strength, for he had not eaten any food or drunk any water for 3 days and 3 nights. David now asked him, "To whom do you belong, and where are you from?" To which he said, "I am an Egyptian attendant, a slave of the Amalekite man, but my master left me because I got sick 3 days ago. We made a raid on the south of the Kerethites, and on the territory of Judah, and on the south of Caleb, and on Ziklag we burned with fire." At this David said to him, "Will you lead me down to this marauder band?" He replied, "If you swear to me by God that you will not put me to death, and that you will not hand me over to my master, I would lead you down to this marauder band." So he led him down to where they were spread out all over the land, eating and drinking and celebrating because of all the great spoil that they had taken from the land of the Philistines and the land of Judah. Then David struck them down from the morning darkness until the following evening. Not a man escaped except 400 men who fled on camels. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his two wives. Nothing of theirs was missing, from the smallest to the greatest. They recovered their sons and their daughters and the spoil. David recovered everything that they had taken. So David took all the flocks and the herds, which they drove before their own livestock. They said, "This is David's spoil." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too tired to go along with David, and who had stayed behind by the Wadi Besor, and they came out to meet David and the people with him. Then David came near to the men, who asked how they were. However, every bad and worthless man among those who had gone with David said, "Since they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we recovered, except that each one may take his wife and his sons and go away." But David said, "You must not do this, my brothers. With what Jehovah has given us, he protected us and gave us into our hand the marauder band that came against us. Who would agree with you on this? The share of the one who went down into battle will be the same as the share of the one who sat by the baggage. All will have a share together." And from that day forward, he kept it as a regulation and a rule for Israel down to this day. When David returned to Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, who were his friends, saying, "Here is a gift for you from the spoil of Jehovah's enemies. He sent it to those who were in Bethel, to those in Ramoth of the Negeb, to those in Jatir, to those in Aroer, to those in Sifmoth, to those in Eshtemoa, to those in Rakal, to those in the cities of the Jeremielites, to those in the cities of the Kenites, to those in Hormah, to those in Borashan, to those in Atak, to those in Hebron, and to all the places that David and his men had frequented. 1 Samuel 31. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines, and many fell slain on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines kept in close range of Saul and his sons, and the Philistines struck down Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The fighting grew fierce against Saul, and the archers found him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and run me through with it, so that these uncircumcised men may not come and run me through and deal ruthlessly with me." But his armor bearer was unwilling, because he was very much afraid. So Saul took the sword and fell on it. When his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he too fell on his own sword and died with him. Thus Saul, his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and all his men died together on that day. When the people of Israel who were in the region of the valley and in the region of the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons had died, they began to abandon the cities and flee. The Philistines then came and occupied them. The next day the Philistines came to strip the slain. They found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent word throughout the land of the Philistines to spread the news in the houses of their idols and among the people. Then they put his armor in the house of the Ashtoreth images and fastened his corpse to the wall of Bethshem. When the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the warriors rose and traveled all night and took the bodies of Saul and his sons off the wall of Bethshem. They returned to Jabesh and burned them there. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh, and they fasted for 7 days. Okay? That's the end of 1 Samuel. And, all right, so up to chapter 3, so 2 Samuel 1. After Saul's death, when David had returned from defeating the Amalekites, David stayed at Ziklag for 2 days. On the 3rd day, a man came from the camp of Saul with his garments ripped apart and dirt on his head. When he approached David, he fell down to the ground and prostrated himself. David asked him, "Where are you coming from?" He replied, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." David asked him, "How did things turn out? Please tell me." To this he said, "The people have fled from the battle, and many have fallen and died. Even Saul and his son Jonathan have died." Then David asked the young man who brought him the news, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" The young man replied, "By chance I was on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul supporting himself on the spear, and the chariots and horsemen had caught up with him. When he turned around and saw me, he called me and I said, 'Here I am.' He asked me, 'Who are you?' I replied, 'I am an Amalekite.' Then he said, 'Please stand over me and put me to death, for I am in great agony, but I am still alive.' So I stood over him and put him to death, for I knew that he could not survive after he had fallen down wounded. Then I took the crown that was on his head and the bracelet that was on his arm, and I brought them here to my lord." At this David took hold of his garments and ripped them apart, and so did all the men who were with him. And they wailed and wept and fasted until evening for Saul, for his son Jonathan, for the people of Jehovah, and for the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David asked the young man who brought him the news, sorry. David asked the young man who brought him the news, "Where are you from?" He said, "I am the son of a foreign resident, an Amalekite." Then David said to him, "Why did you not fear to lift your hand to do away with the anointed of Jehovah?" With that, David called one of the young men and said, "Step forward and strike him." So he struck him down and he died. David said to him, "Your blood is on your own head, because your own mouth testified against you by saying, 'I myself put the anointed of Jehovah to death.'" One sec. So I got a bump on my above my hernia, and it's just the stinging. It's just bothering me. Okay. 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 Then David chanted this dirge over Saul and his son Jonathan, and said that the people of Judah should be taught the dirge called the bow, which is written in the book of Jashar. "The beauty, O Israel, lies slain upon your high places, how the mighty have fallen. Do not tell it in Gath, do not announce it in the streets of Ashkelon, or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice, or the daughters of the uncircumcised men will exult. You mountainous of Gilboa, may there be no dew or rain upon you, nor fields producing holy contributions, because there the shield of mighty ones has defiled, the shield of Saul is no longer anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty ones, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, and the sword of Saul would not return without success. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and cherished during their life, and in death they were not separated. Swifter than the eagles they were, mightier than the lions. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who put ornaments on your clothing. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed over you, my brother Jonathan. You are very dear to me. More wonderful was your love to me than the love of women. How the mighty have fallen, and the weapons of war have perished. 2 Samuel 2. Afterward David inquired of Jehovah, saying, "Should I go up into one of the cities of Judah?" Jehovah said to him, "Go up." Then David asked, "Where should I go?" He replied, "To Hebron." So David went up there with his two wives, Ahinoam and Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. David also brought the men who were with him, each with his household, and they settled in the cities around Hebron. Then the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David as king over the house of Judah. They told David, "The men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who buried Saul." So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by Jehovah, because you showed loyal love to your lord Saul by burying him. May Jehovah show loyal love and faithfulness to you. I will also show kindness because you have done this. Now let your hands be strong and be courageous men, for your lord Saul is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me as king over them." But Abner, the son of Ner, the chief of Saul's army, had taken Saul's son Ishbosheth and brought him across to Mahanaim, and made him king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and over all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he reigned for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, supported David, and the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. In time, Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, Saul's son, went down from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David also went out and encountered them at the pool of Gibeon. And one group sat on the side of the pool, and the other group on that side of the pool. Finally, Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men get up and engage in combat before us." To this Joab said, "Let them get up." So they got up and crossed over by number, 12 for Benjamin and Saul's son Ishbosheth, and 12 from the servants of David. They grabbed one another by the head, and each of them thrust his sword into the side of his opponent, and they all fell down together. So that place which is in Gibeon was called Helkath Hazurim. The fighting that ensued was extremely fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were finally defeated before the servants of David. And now the three sons of Zeruiah were there: Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was as swift on his feet as a gazelle in the open field. Asahel chased after Abner, and he would not veer to the right or to the left in pursuit of Abner. When Abner looked behind, he asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" To which he replied, "Yes, it is." Then Abner said to him, "Veer to your right or to your left and capture one of the young men, and take whatever you strip off him for yourself." But Asahel did not want to stop chasing him. So Abner said to Asahel once again, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But he kept refusing to stop. So Abner struck him in the abdomen with the butt of his spear, and the spear came out from his back, and he fell there and died on the spot. Everyone who came to the place where Asahel fell and died would stop and pause there. Then Joab and Abishai went in pursuit of Abner. As the sun was setting, they came to the hill of Ammah, which faces Giah, on the way into the wilderness of Gibeon. And the Benjaminites gathered together behind Abner, and they formed one company and made a stand on the top of a certain hill. Then Abner called out to Joab, "Is the sword going to devour endlessly? Do you not know that the outcome will only be bitterness? How long, then, will it be before you tell the people to turn back from pursuing their brothers?" At that Joab said, "As surely as the true God is living, if you have not spoken, then only by morning would the people have stopped pursuing their brothers." Joab now blew the horn, and his men stopped chasing after Israel, and the fighting ceased. Abner and his men then marched through Arabah all that night, and crossed the Jordan and marched through the entire ravine, and finally came to Mahanaim. After Joab turned back from pursuing Abner, he gathered all the people together. Of David's servants, 19 were missing, in addition to Asahel. But the servants of David had defeated the Benjaminites, and the men of Abner and the 360 of their men had died. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which is at Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night long, and they reached Hebron at daybreak. All right, 2 Samuel 3. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David dragged on, and David kept getting stronger, and the house of Saul grew steadily weaker. Meanwhile, sons were born to David in Hebron, his firstborn Amnon by Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second was Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite. And the third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, the king of Geshur. The fourth was Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth was Shephatiah, the son of Abital. The sixth was Ithream by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. While the war between the house of Saul and the house of David continued, Abner kept strengthening his position in the house of Saul. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. Ishbosheth later said to Abner, "Why did you have relations with the concubine of my father?" Abner grew very angry over the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head from Judah? Until this very day I have shown loyal love toward the house of your father Saul and to his brothers and his friends, and I have not betrayed you into the hand of David. Yet today you called me to account for an error concerning a woman. May God do so to Abner, and add it, if I do not do for David just as Jehovah swore to him, to transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to establish the throne of David over Israel and over Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." He was not able to say one more word in reply to Abner, for he was afraid of him. Abner immediately sent messengers to David, saying, "To whom does the land belong?" He added, "Make a covenant with me, and I will do whatever I can to turn all Israel to your side." To this he replied, "Good, I will make a covenant with you. The only thing I ask of you is that you do not try to see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see me." Then David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, "Give me my wife, Michal, to whom I became engaged for 100 foreskins of the Philistines." So Ishbosheth sent to take her from her husband, Paltiel, the son of Laish. But her husband kept walking with her, weeping as he followed her as far as Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go, return." At that he returned. Meanwhile, Abner sent word to the elders of Israel, saying, "For some time you wanted to have David as king over you. Now act, for Jehovah said to David, 'By the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies.'" Then Abner spoke to the people of Benjamin. Abner also went to speak privately to David at Hebron to tell him what Israel and the whole house of Benjamin had agreed upon. When Abner came to David at Hebron with 20 men, David held a feast for Abner and for the men with him. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go and gather all Israel together to my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and you will become king over all that you desire." So David sent Abner off, and he went his way in peace. Just then David's servant and Joab returned from a raid, bringing a great quantity of spoil back with them. Abner was no longer with David in Hebron, for he had sent him on his way in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him arrived, Joab was told, "Abner the son of Ner came to the king, and he sent him off, and he went his way in peace." So Joab went in to the king and said, "What have you done? Here Abner came to you. Why did you send him off, so that he successfully got away? You know, Abner the son of Ner. He came here to fool you and to get to know your every move and to find out everything that you are doing." So Joab left David and sent messengers to Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern of Sirah. But David did not know anything about it. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside inside the gate to speak with him privately. However, there he stabbed him in the abdomen, and he died. This was for killing his brother Asahel. When David heard about it later, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever innocent before Jehovah and of the blood guilt for Abner and the son of Ner. May it turn back on the head of Joab and on the entire house of his father. May Joab's house never be without a man suffering from a discharge, or a leper, or a man working at the spindle, or a falling by the sword, or one in need of food." So Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner, because he had put Asahel their brother to death in the battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, "Rip your garments apart and tie on sackcloth and wail over Abner." King David himself was walking behind the funeral bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept loudly at Abner's tomb, and the people gave way to weeping. The king chanted over Abner and said, "Should Abner die the death of a senseless person? Your hands had not been bound, and your feet were not in fetters. You fell like one falling before criminals." At that, all the people wept over him again. Later, all the people came to give David bread for consolation while it was still daytime. But David swore, "May God do so to me and add to it before the sun sets. I taste bread or anything at all." All the people took notice, and it pleased them. Like everything that the king did, it pleased all the people. So all the people and all Israel knew that on that day that the king was not responsible for having Abner the son of Ner put to death. Then the king said to the servants, "Did you know? No, did you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? Today I am weak, although anointed as king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too brutal for me. May Jehovah repay the evildoer according to his own evil." And that's the end of AV 30.